I still remember the day I first met Ryan. It was the first day of college, and the air was buzzing with nervous energy, new faces, new dreams, and that strange mix of excitement and fear that makes your stomach twist. I was the kind of student who kept my head down, buried myself in books, and believed that hard work alone could carve a path to success. Ryan, on the other hand, seemed to float through life effortlessly. He was confident, charming, always cracking jokes, the kind of person everyone gravitated toward without even thinking. There was something magnetic about him, something that made people instantly trust him, laugh with him, and follow his lead. We were paired together for a major project, one that carried nearly 40% of our final grade. I felt a surge of relief when I saw it was him. Finally, I thought, maybe having a partner like Ryan would make this bearable, even enjoyable. He looked at me with that easy grin and said, "Don't worry, I've got your back." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. I trusted him without hesitation. At first, everything went smoothly. We spent hours together in the library, poring over books, typing notes, and shaping our ideas into something that felt real. For the first time since starting college, I didn't feel so alone. Ryan would lean back in his chair, stretch, and tease me about how serious I always looked. "You're too serious, relax a bit," he would say, and I'd laugh, thinking his carefree attitude was just a little harmless fun. I thought I had found a good friend, someone who could balance my intensity with a little lightness. But gradually, I began to notice little cracks. Ryan started avoiding the difficult parts of the research, claiming he had other commitments or that certain sections weren't his style. At first, I didn't think much of it. I covered for him during group meetings, explained things to professors on his behalf, and smoothed over gaps in our work. It felt natural, the thing you do for friends. Yet deep down, something didn't sit right. There were too many coincidences, too many convenient excuses, and he always seemed to have a charm that allowed him to slip past accountability. I didn't see it coming. I didn't realize that while I was trusting him, while I was giving my all to make this project a success, I was walking straight into a trap. The warmth, the jokes, the late-night library sessions, they weren't friendship. They were a stage, a performance meant to disarm me, to make me blind to the truth. And at that moment, I had no idea how much betrayal was lurking just beneath the surface. A month before the final submission, Ryan suggested we meet at his apartment to compile everything. I had done nearly all the work, writing the report, collecting the data, organizing it into neat slides for the presentation. All he needed to do was polish it and submit it. I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from weeks of late nights and caffeine-fueled mornings. So when he leaned back, grinned, and said, "Don't worry, I'll handle the submission tomorrow," I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I trusted him completely, believing that a little rest before the final push would do me good. The following week, when the results were announced, a strange emptiness sank in my chest. Our professor congratulated Ryan for his excellent solo work. Solo work? My heart froze, thumping painfully in my ears. I rushed to check the submission list, hoping it was some kind of mistake. But it wasn't. The project had been uploaded under his name alone. My name had vanished, replaced entirely by his. Every word I had written, every hour I had poured into research was now presented as his accomplishment. I couldn't breathe. My throat tightened, and a sinking feeling clawed its way through me. I confronted him immediately, expecting anger, an apology, anything. But instead, he smiled, that infuriating, calm, confident smile that now felt like a knife twisting in my chest. "It's not personal," he said almost cheerfully. "I just needed the grade. You'll manage without it." Those words haunted me for days, replaying in my mind like a broken record. My so-called friend had stolen my work, my grade, my trust. And he had done it with such ease that it seemed almost effortless for him. The betrayal wasn't just in the act itself. It was in the way he treated it like nothing mattered. I tried to explain everything to the professor, to show the drafts, the timestamps, the work I had done. But Ryan had already crafted his story perfectly. He claimed I hadn't contributed, that he had done everything alone, and to everyone else it sounded convincing. No one believed me. My marks plummeted and I was placed on academic probation. Meanwhile, Ryan's reputation skyrocketed. He became the golden boy of the department, praised for his brilliance, while I was left humiliated and powerless. That night, staring at the cold glow of my laptop screen, I made a silent vow to myself. No matter how long it took, no matter what I had to do, Ryan would face the truth. He couldn't get away with this forever. I didn't know how yet, but I promised myself that justice would find its way. I didn't scream. I didn't chase him through the hallway or throw his textbooks across the room. I went silent instead. Anger can be loud and messy. I decided to be patient and careful. I stopped reacting, stopped giving him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I watched. I listened. I learned everything I could about how he moved, who he trusted, what he wanted. Ryan had always been hungry for the next step, not the slow, steady kind of ambition that grows from hard work, but the instant kind that wants recognition and the spotlight right now. When he started talking about a research internship with a summer lab, my gut tightened. That internship required proof of prior projects and a recommendation letter. He meant to put my stolen work into his portfolio and walk into that internship like it was his. That thought made my blood run cold and then, surprisingly, calm. If he wanted to parade my work as his, then I had an opening, a way to show the truth without sounding like a jealous student. I went through every folder I had access to. Old drafts, partial analyses, early outlines, everything. My cloud backups held timestamps that couldn't be faked easily. Versions saved at 2 a.m, a note with a professor's comment, a stray image of an experiment setup I'd taken on my phone. I found email threads where I had sent data files and updates, messages where Ryan had said, "You handle the writing? I'll talk to them." I took screenshots of conversations, copied file properties, and organized every piece like I was assembling a puzzle. Each timestamp was a tiny nail holding the truth in place. But I knew evidence by itself can be twisted. Ryan was persuasive. He knew how to rewrite a memory and sell it as fact. If I marched in with proof and nothing else, he'd call it fabrication, he'd charm the professors again, and I'd be left worse than before. So I decided to set a stage where the proof would be impossible to deny, somewhere public, where witnesses would see and where the records would speak louder than his words. While I was preparing, I kept up appearances. I smiled at him in the corridor, clapped when he got praise in class, and pretended the betrayal hadn't pierced me. I congratulated him on his achievement with the same steady voice I used in lectures. When he nervously asked for help preparing for the internship interview, I offered to sit with him and go over his portfolio. He beamed, relieved and unsuspecting. To him, I had forgiven and forgotten. To me, that unsuspecting face was an advantage. Every interaction became a small rehearsal. I would casually tell him about a draft I had found or mention a file I accidentally left in a shared drive. He'd respond with his usual shrug, never checking too closely. I planted tiny, believable breadcrumbs, a hint here, a nudge there, enough to make him comfortable but not so much that he'd suspect an ambush. If he was going to present my work as his, he needed an audience. If he needed an audience, I could control them. There were nights I replayed his smile over and over, trying to find when it first turned false. There were mornings when I almost called someone and broke down, when holding everything in felt like holding breath underwater. But I kept breathing. I organized the files into a timeline, labeled every email with dates, and backed everything up on multiple drives. I wrote down every memory that connected me to the work. The coffee stains on the lab notebook, the late-night voice notes, the professor's offhand comment about my method. These were small human proofs that a paper alone could not show. This was not about revenge in the petty sense. It was about restoring what had been taken, my work, my name, my integrity. I didn't want to humiliate him for sport. I wanted the truth to stand where it belonged, clear and undeniable. So I smiled at him, helped him practice answers, and let him walk into his next step thinking he had everything. Meanwhile, I set pieces into place, quiet and sure. When the time came, there would be no room for his silver tongue to hide behind. A month later, the college announced the annual Research Showcase, a live event where top students presented their projects to professors, alumni, and visiting companies. When I saw Ryan's name on the list as the presenter for my project, a cold thrill ran down my spine. This was the stage I had been waiting for, the place where everything could come to light, where his lies would no longer have a shelter to hide under. I approached the event organizer, a senior student named Leah with a carefully rehearsed story. I told her I had some additional data and visualizations related to Ryan's project that could make his presentation more comprehensive. She nodded, welcoming the contribution, and told me I could email her the files so they could be included on the big screen. I smiled to myself as I sent everything: the polished final report, the original drafts with my name stamped across them, screenshots of emails, and timestamps proving weeks of prior work. Every piece was there, ready to speak the truth louder than I ever could. On the day of the showcase, the auditorium buzzed with excitement. Students, professors, and industry visitors filled every seat, cameras ready, eyes alert. Ryan strode to the podium, perfectly composed, slides ready, his charm turned on full blast. "This project represents months of my hard work," he said, his voice steady, confident. I stayed at the back, keeping my breathing calm, recording everything, letting him perform his act. Then it happened. Halfway through his speech, the big screen flickered as if there was a technical glitch. Ryan didn't notice at first, but the next slide that appeared wasn't the one he had prepared. It wasn't his version at all. My name was there, bold and undeniable at the top, research by my name, complete with timestamps that proved it had been created weeks before his so-called submission date. A heavy silence swept over the room. You could almost hear the collective intake of breath, the sudden pause in conversations, the rustle of papers. Ryan froze. His confident demeanor cracked instantly, the practiced charm slipping away. He attempted a nervous laugh, muttering something about a technical error, but it fell flat. The audience wasn't fooled. Leah stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Ryan, why does this version show someone else's authorship?" she asked, looking him directly in the eye. He stammered, trying to form words that would explain the impossible, but nothing came. His jaw tightened, his voice quivering as he searched for an excuse. There was none. I walked forward then, each step deliberate, steady. The room seemed to stretch in silence around me. "Because that someone is me," I said clearly, my voice calm, measured. "And everything he's showing today, I wrote it." The professors exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disbelief to stern recognition. One of them pulled up the online submission records, the timestamps glowing brightly on the projector. The truth was undeniable. Every file, every email, every draft pointed to the same conclusion. Ryan's facade had crumbled. The evidence spoke for itself. Ryan's confident smile vanished the instant the evidence flashed across the big screen. It was like watching someone deflate, air slowly escaping from a balloon they thought was unbreakable. He opened his mouth, probably rehearsing the same excuses he had perfected over weeks, but no words came out. The room was silent, tens of eyes fixed on him waiting. For a moment, he tried to force a grin, a weak, shaky attempt at charm, but it faltered immediately. His aura of control, the thing that had made everyone around him so easily trust him, had crumbled into dust. He finally spoke, his voice low and strained, fumbling through the words. It was a joint effort," he stammered, glancing nervously at the professors. "We both worked on this project. I just presented it differently." The words sounded hollow, even to his own ears. There was no conviction behind them, only desperation. The audience wasn't buying it. A few students exchanged shocked glances, whispering quietly among themselves, while others stared in disbelief. The professors, however, were visibly furious. The head of the department stood up, his face pale with anger, and asked Ryan to step aside so they could review the submission records. The inquiry began right then and there in front of everyone. Documents were pulled up, emails read aloud, timestamps cross-checked. Every single piece of evidence I had meticulously gathered fit together perfectly, leaving no room for doubt. My heart raced as I watched him squirm, realizing the trap had worked flawlessly. It was hard to describe the mixture of relief and surreal satisfaction I felt. Relief because finally the truth had been revealed, and my name would no longer be stolen or erased. Surreal because I had waited months, silently planning, pacing myself, and now the culmination of all that patience was unfolding so publicly. I watched as Ryan's face grew pale, his posture slumping, shoulders heavy with shame that I had only imagined he might feel. By the end of that week, the consequences hit him like a tidal wave. His internship offer, the very reason he had stolen my work in the first place, was revoked immediately. The company, after reviewing the inquiry and the evidence, decided they could not hire someone with such a clear record of dishonesty. He was also charged with academic misconduct by the department and suspended for the semester. The words on the official notice were clinical, devoid of any sympathy. Due to proven academic dishonesty, the student is suspended and all associated privileges are revoked. As for me, I received my own official communication shortly after. My record was cleared, my grade restored, and the probation removed. I should have felt euphoric, triumphant, maybe even gloating. But the reality was different. I felt quiet relief, a deep internal exhale that seemed to release months of tension I didn't even know I'd been holding. There was a calmness in seeing justice done, a quiet acknowledgement that the painstaking work I had done, the research, the preparation, the planning, had finally paid off. It was a victory, yes, but it didn't need to be loud. I didn't need to celebrate. I just needed the truth to be known, and for the world to finally see him for what he really was. Karma, however, had more to teach him than just the academic punishment. Word spread quickly across campus. Students who had once admired Ryan, those who had laughed at his jokes, followed his lead, hung on his every word, began to avoid him. He was no longer charming. He was cautious, withdrawn, and uncomfortably aware of the whispers trailing behind him. His so-called friends, the ones who had once flanked him during classes and social events, seemed to evaporate. It was almost poetic to watch the social walls he had built around himself crumble. The reputation he had carefully constructed, polished, and guarded above all else, that fragile veneer of popularity and respect, was gone. People who had once sought his approval now crossed the street to avoid him, leaving him isolated in the world he had thought he ruled. For weeks, he avoided me entirely. He kept his distance, the shadows of guilt and embarrassment clinging to him wherever he went. But one afternoon, near the college parking lot, he finally stopped me. I had just left a lecture, my bag slung over one shoulder, earbuds tucked in, when I felt his presence behind me. He cleared his throat, hesitant, almost fragile. When I turned, I saw a side of him I hadn't seen before, tired, defeated, a shadow of the confident person who had once fooled everyone. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the distant chatter of students and the hum of cars in the parking lot. It wasn't anger, not really. It was exhaustion, a kind of confession that came too late to undo the damage. His eyes, once sharp and mischievous, were dulled, almost pleading, as if he hoped that maybe, just maybe, I could forgive him or overlook everything. I looked at him, calm and steady, feeling a strange mixture of pity and resolve. For a brief moment, I remembered all the sleepless nights I had endured, the silent frustration, the planning, and the waiting. I thought of every time I had believed in him, every ounce of trust I had placed in his hands, and how easily he had broken it. I let a pause stretch between us, long enough for him to feel the weight of what had happened, long enough for the truth to sink in one last time. "Neither did you," I replied, my voice quiet, almost indifferent but laced with the weight of finality. Those words didn't mock him. They didn't gloat. They were a mirror reflecting the truth. He had chosen this path. He had taken what wasn't his, and he had suffered the consequences. There was nothing left to say beyond that. I turned away, each step deliberate, feeling the freedom of closure settle over me like a warm cloak. Behind me, I could feel him standing there, silent, grappling with his loss. The grade, the internship, the respect, the friendships, all of it stripped away by the very choices he had made. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The story had reached its conclusion, the balance restored. The weeks that followed were oddly quiet. I no longer had to look over my shoulder or worry about stolen recognition. The air on campus felt lighter, almost liberated. Students began to speak to me with newfound respect, not because of vindictiveness, but because truth had been vindicated. I went back to my routine, attending classes, submitting work, preparing for my own internship applications, feeling a confidence that wasn't tied to revenge, but to the knowledge that honesty and persistence could outlast deception and charm. Ryan, meanwhile, became a cautionary tale whispered among students. He wasn't humiliated for the sake of humiliation. He was left with the consequences of his choices. Alone, reflective, stripped of the easy admiration he had once taken for granted. And though I could have relished seeing him stumble, I didn't. There was no thrill in his suffering. The satisfaction came from the quiet, undeniable fact that justice had been served, and that I had finally reclaimed what was mine: my work, my integrity, my dignity. That day in the parking lot remained etched in my memory. His tired gaze, his hesitant words, the way he seemed to shrink under the weight of everything he had lost. It was the final acknowledgement that my patience, my planning, and my unwavering belief in the truth had mattered. It wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It was about restoration, about making sure that deceit could not thrive unchecked. And as I walked away from him, the sun catching the edges of my backpack and the campus buzzing softly around me, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. The kind of peace that comes when the storm has passed and the skies are finally clear, leaving only the truth, steady and unshakable, shining in its place. Looking back now, I don't regret what I did. I don't regret exposing Ryan, and I don't regret taking my time to plan every step of the way. What I do regret, if I can call it that, is trusting him so blindly, giving him every chance to prove he was my friend, believing that someone's words and smiles were enough to measure their loyalty. That trust, that innocence was what allowed him to deceive me in the first place. But perhaps I needed that betrayal. Perhaps it was necessary for me to understand what real strength looks like, the kind that doesn't yell, doesn't rage, and doesn't seek revenge for the sake of vengeance. Real strength waits. Real strength observes. Real strength acts with precision when the time is right. I think that's what this whole experience taught me more than anything. Revenge doesn't have to be loud or violent. It doesn't mean shouting, fighting, or humiliating someone publicly just to see them squirm. Revenge isn't about creating chaos for satisfaction. True revenge, the kind that lasts, the kind that actually makes an impact, is letting the truth speak louder than lies. It's about standing tall, even when no one else believes you. When everyone else doubted me, when professors shrugged, friends whispered doubts, and Ryan smiled as if the world belonged to him. I remained silent, collecting evidence, waiting for the right moment. I learned that power lies not in aggression, but in patience, persistence, and faith in the undeniable truth. Ryan, in his own way, taught me lessons I never wanted to learn. He taught me that not every smile is genuine, that charm can be a mask for deceit. He taught me that not every person you call a friend is worth your loyalty or your trust. And perhaps most painfully, he taught me that betrayal doesn't come in obvious forms. It can be subtle, quiet, hidden behind jokes, casual conversations, or seemingly harmless acts. And yet, even with all that betrayal, even after the hurt and the frustration, I realized something else. Betrayal isn't meant to destroy you. Sometimes life delivers these moments not to break you, but to build your backbone, to harden your resolve, to teach you how to stand for yourself even when the world seems unfair. It's strange, looking back, how much I've changed because of this experience. I used to believe that effort alone guaranteed fairness, that honesty would always be rewarded. But reality doesn't work that way. Life isn't fair, and sometimes people you trust the most will take advantage of your goodwill. But what life does give you is opportunity, the chance to reclaim what is yours, to defend your truth, to rise above lies, and to ensure that justice finds its way even when it's delayed. I learned that being patient, being strategic, and being calm in the face of injustice is far more powerful than reacting with anger or frustration. I also learned that closure doesn't always come from seeing someone punished. It comes from reclaiming your own power. When Ryan's internship was revoked, when his suspension was announced, and when his reputation crumbled, I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel the rush of satisfaction that revenge stories in books and movies promise. What I felt was relief, the relief that the truth had finally been revealed, that my work, my name, and my efforts had been recognized, and that I could finally move forward without carrying the weight of his deceit. True closure was in knowing that I had stayed patient, that I had acted wisely, and that the outcome wasn't a result of luck, but of careful planning and persistence. Moving forward, life began to feel different. I graduated with honors, securing every bit of recognition I had earned. I landed that dream internship I had been working toward for years, the one I thought might have slipped through my fingers when Ryan stole my project. And yet, more than the grades or the accolades, more than the positions or the certificates, what mattered most was the inner confidence I had built. I knew now that my strength didn't come from beating someone else or proving I was smarter. It came from knowing who I was, what I stood for, and how far I was willing to go to defend my integrity. Ryan, I realized, didn't need to be destroyed. Karma had done its part. His actions caught up with him in a way that was visible to everyone: professors, peers, even the people who had once envied him. He had lost his standing, his respect, and most importantly, his credibility. And I didn't have to lift a hand to make it happen. I simply exposed the truth, remained steadfast, and let the consequences follow. The lesson was clear. You don't have to be cruel to succeed. You don't have to fight fire with fire. Truth has a way of revealing itself, and sometimes it's all the justice you need. Reflecting on it now, I see that every betrayal, every deceit, every moment of doubt I endured was a step toward self-discovery. I realized how strong I was, how much patience I could muster, and how important it was to rely on evidence and logic rather than emotions alone. Life had tested me, pushed me to my limits, and in doing so had revealed qualities I never knew I possessed: courage, resilience, patience, and a quiet, unwavering commitment to truth. These were the rewards of my trials. I also understood more than ever that relationships are fragile. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. Some people come to teach you lessons, whether painful or enlightening. Some friendships, no matter how promising they seem, are temporary and conditional. Recognizing this doesn't make you cynical. It makes you wise. It teaches you how to choose allies carefully, how to protect your work and your integrity, and how to navigate a world where not everyone plays fair. As I stepped into my internship, prepared to start a new chapter, I carried all these lessons with me. I didn't feel anger when I saw Ryan later, or relief in a smug way. I felt a quiet sense of mastery over my own life. I had navigated the storm, exposed the deception, and reclaimed my narrative. And in doing so, I realized that winning doesn't require destroying someone else. It requires standing firm, acting with intelligence and patience, and letting life, or karma, complete the story. Looking back, I can say this with certainty: betrayal is painful, but it is also instructive. It can break you if you let it, or it can build you into someone stronger, wiser, and more aware of the world around you. I could have reacted impulsively, shouted, or tried to humiliate Ryan publicly. That might have felt satisfying for a moment, but it wouldn't have been meaningful or lasting. The real victory lay in exposing the truth with precision, ensuring that justice was served, and reclaiming my own dignity in the process. And so I moved forward with my life, carrying the lessons of that experience like a shield and a compass. I trusted more carefully, worked harder, and valued honesty above charm or charisma. I knew now that strength isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet, deliberate, and unwavering. I learned to value the power of patience, the importance of evidence, and the undeniable force of truth. You don't need to destroy someone to win. You don't need to yell, fight, or retaliate. Sometimes all it takes is patience, resilience, and faith in the truth. And the world, in its own way, ensures that justice is delivered. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Never underestimate the quiet ones, the ones who sit back, who don't shout, who don't demand attention. They observe, they notice, they remember every word, every action, every betrayal. Their silence is not weakness, it's patience. Their calm is not indifference, it's strategy. They collect the truth piece by piece, building it into something undeniable. And when the time is right, when the moment comes and the stage is set, they let it burn. Not out of anger, not out of cruelty, but because the truth has a power all its own. It exposes lies, it restores justice, and it reminds the world that honesty and patience always outweigh deceit and arrogance. Never mistake quiet for weakness. It can be the most formidable strength of all.